Hey everybody, my name is Glenn, and in this video I want to show you all how I modified my newest Ibanez 7-string. Now, this video took some time to put together for reasons that I'll get into towards the end of the video. Also, this is my first time ever speaking in any of my videos, but I have some pretty cool mods that I've done to this guitar, so I hope you'll stick around to see me break down this guitar and put it back together. Now, as I start to take apart the guitar by taking off the strings, there's actually a couple of reasons why I bought the guitar. First of all, as silly as it sounds, I really love reverse headstock guitars. I've always thought they look super sick and awesome, but the main reason why I got this guitar was for the scale length on the 7-string. I had made a YouTube short on my channel playing an Ibanez JBM27 guitar, and while that was cool to have for a little bit, I could never really get along with 26.5 scale length guitars, unfortunately because of my short stubby fingers, so 25.5s on 7-string always made sense to me just from a comfort standpoint, even though it said you might lose a little bit of tuning stability and the range that you could down tune, but I never really found that to be a problem since I have pitch shifters and that always seemed to work out for me in the end. So essentially what I'm trying to do with this guitar is recreate the Jake Bowen signature model, but with a more comfortable scale length that works for me. And now with the strings completely off the guitar, I can shift my attention to taking apart the tremolo and the electronics. So this guitar came with the Ibanez Edge 02 7-string tremolo, and here I'm just securing the string blocks or the saddle inserts to the guitar so they don't fall out as I turn over the guitar and take out the, well, first of all, the arm, but the tremolo springs in the back, and then also the electronics in that cavity. So here I am taking off the small plate that holds the tremolo springs to the tremolo block, as I'm not going to be needing it for the future upgrades that this tremolo is going to get. Then here I am taking off the tremolo springs, and then also clipping the ground wire that goes for the tremolo claw, as all of these components will be upgraded. And then here I'm just taking out the tremolo screws, or the tremolo claw screws, because those will also be upgraded as well. And with the tremolo claw screws out of the guitar, the tremolo claw is free, which also makes the tremolo free, which I'm going to put off to the side. So I can shift my attention now to the electronics by taking off the volume and tone knobs, the selector switch tip, and then also unscrewing the selector switch from the body with my Phillips head screwdriver. And then once those are out of there, I will switch to using my little Music Nomad spanner, which will loosen the volume and tone pots, and the alter switch, which actually provides some alternate coil splitting and series parallel wiring for this guitar with DiMarzio deactivators. Now, I actually really like the deactivators in this guitar. I feel like they are a super balanced pickup, especially for down tuning. So I'm actually going to keep these pickups for a potential 7-string project in the future. But yeah, I absolutely liked how they sounded in this guitar, and here I'm just taking off the plates in the back for the electronics cavity and getting everything pretty much out of there. And now with all of the electronics cavity backplates off, I can now begin to free the electronics from the cavity side and begin to clip wires, as I will be redoing the electronics basically from scratch, so no need for me to bust out a soldering iron just yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and just take my time to clip all the wires from the selector switch, from the volume pot and the output jack, and kind of clip them cleanly so they don't really get in the way. Put those electronics off to the side, get the output jack wiring out of the main electronics cavity, and turn the guitar back around so that I can begin to unscrew the pickups from their cavities, and they come apart pretty easy. The pickup comes out of the cavity, and then I will save the direct mounting screws because I will use them again for later. And then smart thing of me to do here is to label the pickups. Since they are a deactivator set, it can be a little bit difficult to figure out which one's the bridge and which one is the neck, so simply labeling them with a piece of tape, putting it off to the side, and I will go ahead and do the same for the neck pickup. Unscrew the screws, get the pickup out of the cavity, save the screws, put them off to the side, and then take another piece of tape, kind of rip it to length, don't make it too long, make sure it fits on the backside of the pickup, and then take my Sharpie, label it, and then put that off to the side as well. And with all of that done, now we have a completely naked guitar. And with the guitar off to the side, now I can focus on the tremolo upgrades that I have for this bridge. So the first thing that I'm going to do is actually remove the saddles so that I can get to the underside where the tremolo block actually attaches to the base plate, because the first modification that I'm going to do to this tremolo is add a brass block from FU Tone. Now, I've always liked adding brass blocks to floating tremolos, not only for sustain and tonal purposes, but I also feel it adds a nice little bit of weight in a non-intrusive way to balance out the guitar, since brass is a heavier material than some of the stock material that these blocks are made out of, like zinc. So here I am taking apart the mounting screws from the block side, and with the tremolo block removed, I can also remove the tremolo arm screw and that whole assembly, because I will also be upgrading the tremolo arm to a red bishop magic arm. Now, the reason for upgrading the arm is actually pretty simple one, really. I actually don't like the screw-on collar for the Edge 02 because it will always get loose when you use it one time. Whereas the magic arm, it's kind of the best of both worlds, where it's a push-in arm, but then you screw to get it tight, and then it will always stay in place. So here I am putting that arm assembly together. There's a little small bushing that the tremolo arm will sit in, so making sure that's all there. Then also putting the spring clip in place so that when you push the tremolo arm down, it will snap into place and it won't move, and it looks great from there. So then there's the brass block, nice hefty weight to it, and then here is standard procedure as normal. Put the screws back onto the brass block. I always start with the center and then go off to the edges, get those, and then don't screw down all the way. For either screws, just go in even increments and then really tighten down once everything is pretty nice and snug. And then all I have to do now is just put back the saddles where they belong, and then we will continue from there. And now with the tremolo upgrades done, now I can focus on getting these new DiMarzio Titan pickups that I got for this guitar installed. Funny thing is, I did the same thing with the deactivator set by labeling these, just to make sure that the bridge is going in the bridge slot and the neck is going in the neck slot, since these look pretty identical. But yeah, I've always loved the DiMarzio Titan pickup. Obviously, that was in the JBM27 guitar that I mentioned from earlier. But basically, ever since the pickup launched back somewhere in the mid-2010s, and I just really loved how aggressive it sounded for modern metal tones. There's something about the high mids that I really like, how it just is super in your face and just sounds killer. So here I am making sure the direct mounting screws that I saved from earlier get through to the tabs on the new pickups. They usually are screwed out for pickup rings, so it does take a little bit of work to get the direct mounting screws all the way through there. And then I will worry about leveling the pickups properly when I go ahead and install the pickguard, which should be somewhere right about now. And with the pickguard, I'm just affixing it to the body, getting it in place so that I know exactly where to drill the screw holes when now I attach the new push-pull pot and the new three-way switch. So I decided to do a push-pull volume pot with a new three-way toggle switch in the new electronics for this guitar, as my other guitars have the same similar layout as well. Just makes more sense in my head for grabbing tones a lot easier, especially with the 3-head toggle switch that's in there, which is actually from Ernie Ball Music Man, and this allows me to achieve the Jason Richardson wiring, where switching to the middle position immediately splits the inner coils of both pickups, which makes it easier to access clean tones. Again, it's just easier for me to access a clean tone with this configuration and just makes overall switching more efficient. Here I am securing the volume pot with the nut and washer that it came with, using the Music Nomad spanner wrench, which is a helpful tool to have, especially for tightening things down like that. And then last thing I'm going to do is install the volume knob, which is a gold knob with a black pearl on top, just to tie in the black and gold theme. And with the selector switch and the volume knob in place, I can begin to install the pickguard. Here I am laying down some tape just to make sure that the pickguard doesn't move when I go to drill holes for the pickguard screws. Then I count out how many I'll need. I believe it was 10 screws altogether. Then I measure the width of the screw so that I can find a drill bit that is slightly smaller than the width of the screw. Essentially what I want to have happen is when the screw goes in the hole that I drill, I want the screw to be a little bit bigger than the hole so that when it's screwed into place, it doesn't move and it's nice and secure. So I mark my holes with a Sharpie and center punch each one of them just to make sure that when I do drill, the drill bit doesn't walk everywhere and I drill straight down where I need to and it doesn't slip. Then I drill out the holes one by one. I also taped off the drill bit at the certain depth just so that I don't drill all the way through to the other side of the guitar. And yeah, I would say it's a pretty easy process. Clean up a little bit, and then I'll begin installing the pickguard screws. I decided to go with gold screws, again, to accent the black and gold theme that I have for this guitar. And I got the pickguard from a Reverb listing, and the pickguard inspiration actually came from Ben Eller's old video that he did where he modified his RG720 to be a lot like his RG550. I thought that came out looking pretty awesome, so I thought I'd do the same with this. And especially with the gold pickguard screws, I think this came out pretty top notch. So thank you, Uncle Ben, for the inspiration. And with the pickups installed and the pickguard put together on the other side, now I can focus my attention on soldering all the new electronics together. So here I am just separating out the pickup lines and making sure that they go to the right spot on the selector switch. And what's really cool about the selector switch as compared to other selector switches is it tells you exactly which color of the wire goes to which terminal on the switch, and it all sort of works out with the wiring that I'm trying to achieve, as previously mentioned. Also just taking great precaution and covering the backside of the guitar with the microfiber cloth, as it will catch any sort of solder that flies around, and making sure that it doesn't get onto the backside of the guitar. Even though it's on the backside of the guitar, I will know it's there. That will annoy me. So just making sure that nothing happens to the backside of the guitar as I continue to get all of the wires put together, just making sure that all the contact points that the wire gets onto gets enough solder. Now I'm doing the same thing with the neck pickup, just making sure that those wires get connected where they need to. So enjoy the nice soldering montage. And now with both pickup wires attached to the selector switch, now I can run the wires from the selector switch to the volume pot. And as you just saw there very briefly, I copper shielded both cavities, the main electronics cavity and the output jack cavity. Sometimes when you make electronics modifications, the shielding paint from factory isn't consistent enough to block out all of the noise. So I copper shield just to give myself an extra layer of protection against noise, and making sure that everything, when it's all connected together, is completely silent and working as it should. So here I am prepping the output jack by running the wires from its cavity to the main electronics cavity. I am using a gold pure tone stereo barrel style output jack. Kind of a lot to say. Now I know for some guitarists, upgrading their output jack is an unnecessary or negligible modification, but I would strongly argue against that on the basis alone that it's the first point of contact that signal passes through. So if that's bad, it just creates a lot of headache. So by upgrading, not only you ensure having a part that lasts for a long time, but it just saves you the headache of having to deal with that ever. Also, upgrading your output jack introduces you into the world of soldering, because all you have to do is just solder 2 points of connection together, and then you can develop your soldering skills from there. Moving on from the output jack installation, now I'm just buttoning up the electronics cavity by grounding all my grounds to the copper shielding, which is actually another benefit of copper shielding your guitar cavity, is you can run all of your grounds directly to the shielding instead of a pot or selector switch, and it just cleans things up inside the electronics cavity. Then I'm also installing the brass tremolo claw with the tremolo claw screws, and there I just put some paraffin wax on the screws. I've had it happen before where installing the screws without any sort of lubrication, the screw actually snapped off, and it was not fun to remove that from the guitar. So just another thing to be aware of if you are installing a new tremolo claw. If the screws are going in there pretty tight, back them out, get some lubrication on them, and they should go in pretty easily. And there, I'm just checking with a practice amp to verify all of my electronics work, the switching works, and now I'm just putting the volume knob back on the guitar, just making sure that gets placed properly. And now we can shift to the other side of the guitar, which is the tuners. So here I have some Goto locking tuners that I'm actually changing out the tuner buttons for gold tuner buttons. So the idea behind mixing up the hardware was actually a thing that Mayones Guitars does, where they mix up some of the hipshot hardware. So I figured I have these gold Goto tuners from a previous project lying around. Why don't I just try to mimic that a little bit? So all that requires is just loosening the screw on the button, which comes apart pretty easily, and then just swapping the buttons. They're the exact same shape and size, they're just a different color. So the swap is pretty easy to put together. And now here I am just putting the tuners onto the actual headstock. So making sure that I get the small screw that holds the tuner in place on the backside. I'm also using the gold screw that came with the gold Goto tuners that I swapped over from the buttons. And then I'm using a gold washer and then the black nut that came with the black locking tuners, and just mixing up the hardware that way and then tightening them down with a 10mm and making sure that's all good to go. And next up is applying the gold Ibanez logo to the headstock. Now this Iron Label RG came with a black logo on the headstock, which was pretty stealthy but also really hard to see. So I wanted to make the logo more present, but I didn't want to put the logo straight onto the headstock as is, because the logo that I have here is just the plain lettering, and the logo that was actually on the guitar, even though you couldn't see it, was the one with the sort of swoosh or check mark. So what I did was I vinyl wrapped the headstock with a satin black vinyl wrap, and it actually worked out pretty good because it matched the rest of the body. And this is kind of my first at-bat vinyl wrapping anything, so definitely I made some mistakes along the way, but I definitely think it came out pretty cool looking. And if I didn't tell you that it was vinyl wrapped, you would have thought that it probably belonged there. And with all the modifications done, all that's left is just to throw some strings on this. So I had some Ernie Ball Mammoth Slinkies laying around. They are a 12 to 62 set. And then I also have some plain 9s hanging around as well. So essentially the string gauge from top to bottom ends up being 9 to 62, and I'm tuning this to drop A. It would have made more sense to use a 10 to 62 set instead of mixing up the strings like this, but I actually like using 9 gauge strings. I've been using 9s for the better part of the last 5 or so years, and I've gotten really used to that tension on my hands, so it made sense for me to take the sort of baritone set that the Mammoth Slinky are and then put a 9 on top of it. And restringing a floating tremolo is standard. Just snip off the ball end, make sure that gets into the saddle, and then bring it up all the way to the tuner. Now, some people will say locking tuners on a double locking guitar doesn't really make any sense, and I agree with you, but I'm also very lazy when it comes to restringing my guitars, so any sort of advantage that I can take with getting the guitar restrung, I will take, which is why I installed the locking tuners in the first place. And the last thing that I'll do here is install some DiMarzio ClipLoks. These are my favorite strap locks that are out there on the market. I put them on every single guitar. I've never had them fail on me. They are clearly my favorite. And these are the Steve Vai Utopia signature ClipLoks. He has a bunch of these in different colors. I obviously went with the black and gold, obviously to keep on with the black and gold theme. And I feel like this is a nice way to wrap up pretty much everything that I've done to this guitar. Then I'll give the guitar one more wipe down with some Lizard Spit guitar polish meant specifically for satin finishes. And that's every modification I've done on this Ibanez 7-string. And now here we are with the guitar, present day, and the very last mod that I did to this was to install some stainless steel frets. Now what I didn't show was me attempting a fret leveling job on this, and I ended up making the playing experience a lot worse. So I took it to a local shop to get that fixed. But then I also thought in the same mind, if I'm having them fix the frets on this, I might as well have them refretted with stainless steel frets. Now this did take a while to get back from the guitar shop as they were busy with other client guitars, but I definitely feel the wait was worth it as these frets are immaculate and as perfect as they can be. It's also really nice knowing that these stainless steel frets will hold up against all the riffs that I'm going to be throwing at it. And additionally, I plan to save the neck on this for a project in the distant future, so upgrading the frets now is just one modification that's already been done for that project. But for now, I think the guitar came out super sick looking. I definitely am happy to have it back in my lineup. And to anyone that's watched the video all the way through to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hopefully my next video doesn't take 3 months for me to make. But until next time, thank you all for watching, and take care.